Hi, everyone. Emma Carter was the kind of woman who could hold the world on her shoulders. A skilled surgeon at Greenfield General Hospital, her days were long, her nights unpredictable, and her dedication unwavering. She was the epitome of balance, professional, maternal, and fiercely loyal to her family. But as with any seemingly perfect balance, the cracks were hidden, faint but real. Her husband, David, had been working from home for years, coding and debugging his way through countless IT projects. It seemed like an ideal arrangement. He could be there for their 17-year-old daughter, Lily, while Emma juggled her demanding career. Yet in the quiet hours of the house, a storm was brewing. Megan, Emma's younger sister, had been living with them for almost a year. A college dropout with nowhere else to go, Megan was a free spirit who lived life with a recklessness that contrasted sharply with Emma's meticulous nature. Emma had welcomed her into their home, hoping to offer stability and guidance. Megan was charming, vivacious, and magnetic, traits that seemed to draw everyone in, including David. Emma noticed subtle changes in David over the months. He laughed more at Megan's jokes, his eyes lingered on her a beat too long, and their conversations had a warmth that felt almost intimate. Emma dismissed her unease as paranoia born from exhaustion. After all, David was a good man, wasn't he? David, on the other hand, felt trapped. He adored Emma, but found himself longing for the intimacy and attention her grueling hours left no room for. Megan's carefree nature filled the void in ways that he wasn't proud of. At first, it was harmless, shared smiles, inside jokes, stolen moments of connection. But the boundaries grew blurry, and David's conscience began to whisper louder each day. One late evening, Emma came home to a dark house, the faint glow of the living room lamp her only guide. She dropped her keys on the counter, her shoulders heavy with fatigue, and noticed David's laptop abandoned on the couch. She smiled softly, imagining him asleep upstairs, but as she turned to head to the bedroom, a quiet laugh from the den froze her in place. Megan's voice, and David's. Emma stood still, her heart pounding. She couldn't make out their words, but the warmth in their tones sent a chill through her. She wasn't ready to confront the feeling yet. For now, exhaustion won out. She headed upstairs to the solace of her bed, unaware that her world was teetering on the edge of betrayal. Emma woke the next morning with a heaviness in her chest that she couldn't shake. The sound of Lily banging cupboards in the kitchen reminded her of the day ahead, but her thoughts lingered on the faint laughter from the night before. It wasn't the first time something had fell off between David and Megan, but she always pushed it aside, chalking it up to her overworked mind. David greeted her with his usual warmth, a cup of coffee already waiting for her on the kitchen counter. Morning, Eminencia. You looked wiped out last night. Long shift. Yeah, Emma replied, taking a sip of the coffee. Thanks for this. Lily, seated at the table with her phone glued to her hand, muttered something about an upcoming chemistry test. Emma nodded absent-mindedly, her focus on David. He looked relaxed, cheerful even. Too cheerful. Megan wandered in moments later, dressed casually in shorts and a tank top that seemed just a bit too revealing for the breakfast table. She flashed David a smile as she grabbed a slice of toast, and Emma's stomach tightened. Morning, sis, Megan chirped, her tone light and breezy. Sleep okay? Emma forced a smile. Yeah, you. Like a baby, Megan replied before turning to David. Oh, by the way, thanks for helping me with that back thing last night. My muscles feel so much better. Emma froze, her coffee cup halfway to her lips. Back thing? David cleared his throat, the easygoing vibe faltering for just a moment. Megan had some knots in her back. I gave her a quick massage. No big deal. Emma nodded slowly, her instincts screaming at her to press further. But Lily's presence at the table deterred her. Instead, she focused on finishing her coffee, pretending she wasn't dissecting every word, every glance exchanged between her husband and her sister. The day dragged on in the usual chaos of surgeries and paperwork, but Emma couldn't shake the unease. It wasn't just the late-night laughter or the casual mention of a massage. It was the accumulation of little things. The way David's face seemed to light up around Megan. The way Megan sought his attention, often brushing past him with an intimacy that felt too familiar. By the time Emma's shift ended, She was exhausted but resolute. She couldn't let this fester any longer. She decided she would talk to David tonight, not to accuse but to clear the air. Maybe it was all in her head. Maybe she was misreading things. But if there was even a sliver of truth to her fears, she needed to know. As Emma pulled into the driveway, the house loomed before her, quiet and unassuming. She sat in the car for a moment, summoning the strength to face whatever awaited her inside. Little did she know, the discovery she feared most was closer than she imagined. Emma stepped into the house, her footsteps echoing in the silence. The living room was dark, save for the faint glow of a lamp near the corner. She dropped her keys on the counter and noticed the faint scent of lavender, Megan's signature body lotion. It was everywhere lately, a scent that clung to the air and reminded Emma that her sister had become far too comfortable in this house. As she moved toward the stairs, a muffled voice caught her attention. She paused, straining her ears. It was coming from the den again, low and hushed. She inched closer, the sound of her heartbeat roaring in her ears. "Megan, relax. I've got this," David's voice said, soft and soothing. Emma froze, her stomach flipping. She peeked around the corner, her breath caught in her throat. There they were, David seated on the couch, Megan sprawled in front of him, her head resting on his thigh as he kneaded her shoulders. Megan's face was turned away, but her body language was relaxed, almost intimate. Emma's mind raced. It was just a massage, wasn't it? Something innocent? But the way David's hands moved, the way his focus was entirely on Megan, made Emma's blood run cold. That feels amazing," Megan murmured, her voice low and content. Emma couldn't take it anymore. She flicked the light switch, flooding the room with brightness. Both David and Megan jolted, their eyes wide with surprise. "What's going on here?" Emma asked, her voice steady but laced with tension. David shot to his feet, his hands raised as if to ward off an attack. "Emma, it's not what it looks like. Megan was just complaining about her back again, and Again?" Emma cut him off, her eyes narrowing. She turned to Megan, who sat frozen, her expression a mix of guilt and defiance. "Is this what you do while I'm working late? Make my husband your personal masseuse?" "Emma, stop," David said, stepping between them. "You're overreacting. It's just a massage." "Just a massage?" Emma repeated, her voice rising. She felt a cocktail of emotions swirling inside her. Anger, hurt, confusion. She turned on her heel and stormed upstairs, needing space to process what she had just witnessed. In the bedroom, Emma paced back and forth, her mind replaying the scene over and over. She wanted to believe David, but the nagging doubts wouldn't let her. Why was Megan so comfortable with him? Why was David so quick to brush off her concerns? And why did it feel like she was the outsider in her own home? David came up a few minutes later, his expression contrite. "Emma, we need to talk." She stopped pacing and crossed her arms, meeting his gaze. "Then start talking, David. Because right now, I don't know what to think." David sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry if it looked bad. I didn't mean for it to. Megan's been stressed lately, and I thought I was helping. That's all it was." Emma shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. "Do you even realize how this looks? How it feels to come home to that after working my ass off to support this family?" Emma didn't sleep much that night. She lay in bed next to David, staring at the ceiling, her mind churning. His explanation had been convincing, but the image of his hands on Megan's shoulders was seared into her memory. What was worse, she couldn't shake the feeling that Megan's reaction wasn't one of an innocent bystander. David, on the other hand, slept soundly, as if the confrontation hadn't happened. Emma turned her head to watch him, his face peaceful, almost oblivious. Was she really overreacting? Had her exhaustion from work made her misinterpret the situation? She wanted to believe him, to trust that this was all some misunderstanding, but doubt gnawed at the edges of her thoughts. The morning arrived too quickly, and the household routine resumed as if nothing had happened. Lily left early for school, her headphones in as she walked out the door with a quick wave. Megan breezed into the kitchen, her hair tied in a loose bun, her demeanor unbothered. "Morning, sis," Megan said, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "Everything okay? You seemed upset last night. Emma's jaw tightened. She busied herself with her own coffee, avoiding Megan's gaze. Are you fine? Megan shrugged, her tone casual. Good? I'd hate for things to be awkward. The audacity of her nonchalance sent a surge of anger through Emma, but she bit her tongue. Confronting Megan now, in the middle of breakfast, wouldn't solve anything. She needed to be calm and deliberate. David walked in moments later, his laptop tucked under his arm. Morning, ladies, he said, kissing Emma on the cheek. She stiffened at the gesture, unsure whether it was genuine or a performance. Emma decided to keep herself busy, throwing on her scrubs and heading to work early. The hospital was her sanctuary, a place where things made sense, where she had control. But even in the midst of surgeries and consultations, her thoughts drifted back to the tension at home. She found herself replaying every interaction between David and Megan, searching for clues she might have missed. That evening, Emma came home later than usual. The house was quiet, the dim light of the living room casting long shadows across the walls. She set her bag down and glanced around, the stillness unsettling. She found Megan in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone with a glass of wine in hand. David's upstairs, Megan said without looking up. Lily's at a friend's. Emma nodded, her exhaustion pressing down on her like a weight. Good, she said simply, heading toward the stairs. But as she reached the landing, she paused, a thought gnawing at her. She turned back toward Megan. Megan, Emma said, her voice steady but firm. We need to talk. Megan raised an eyebrow, setting her phone down. About? Emma walked into the kitchen, her gaze locked on her sister. About boundaries. About respect. About why you think it's appropriate to treat my husband like he's your personal. Whatever. Megan's expression darkened. Wow, you really think I'm after David? That's insulting, Emma. Emma crossed her arms. It's not just about you, Megan. It's about how you behave in this house. I invited you here because I wanted to help you. But lately, you've been making me question whether that was a mistake. Megan stood, her stance defiant. You're being paranoid. David is your husband. You should trust him. Emma took a step closer, her voice low but fierce. Trust goes both ways. If I feel like something's off, it's my right to address it. You might think this is harmless, but I don't. So let's be clear, whatever this is, it stops now. Megan opened her mouth to respond, but closed it, her jaw tightening. Without another word, she grabbed her glass of wine and stormed out of the kitchen, leaving Emma standing there, her heart racing. Upstairs, David was waiting for her, seated on the edge of their bed. He looked up as she entered, his expression cautious. Did something happen? Emma sighed, sitting beside him. I talked to Megan. I told her this dynamic between you two needs to stop. David frowned. Emma, you don't have to. Emma interrupted. Because if I don't, I'll never stop questioning it. And I don't want to feel like this in my own home. David reached for her hand, his touch tentative. I understand. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right. Emma looked at him, searching his face for sincerity. She wanted to believe him, but a part of her couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. The next few days were a strained attempt at normalcy. Megan kept her distance, retreating to her room or disappearing for long walks. David was overly attentive, making small gestures like cooking dinner or offering to help with household tasks Emma usually handled. And Emma tried to convince herself that things were getting better. But deep down, she knew that tension this palpable couldn't dissolve overnight. One evening, after dinner, Lily came home from her study group, her mood unusually light. She dropped her backpack by the door and made her way to the kitchen, where Emma was loading the dishwasher. Hey, Mom, Lily said, grabbing a soda from the fridge. Megan and Dad seemed pretty chummy earlier. What's up with that? Emma froze, her hands gripping the edge of the sink. She turned slowly, forcing a casual tone. What do you mean? Lily shrugged. I don't know. I came home for a second to grab a book. They were in the den, laughing about something. He was showing her something on his laptop. They looked cozy. Emma's pulse quickened. Did they say anything to you? No. They barely noticed I was there, Lily said before retreating to her room, oblivious to the storm she'd just stirred in her mother. Emma closed the dishwasher and wiped her hands, her mind racing. She couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that there was more going on than David was admitting. Her earlier confrontation with Megan had brought some relief, but Lily's comment had reignited her doubts. She decided to take matters into her own hands. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Emma crept into the den. David's laptop was still on the coffee table, its screen dark. She hesitated for a moment, guilt washing over her. But the need to know outweighed her discomfort. She opened the laptop and typed in David's password. It was something simple. He'd never been one for complicated passwords. The desktop appeared, cluttered with folders and files. Emma's hands trembled as she navigated through his recent activity. Most of it was work-related, but one folder caught her eye: miscellaneous. She clicked it, her heart pounding. Inside were photos and videos, most of them mundane, family outings, random screenshots, memes. But as she scrolled, one file made her stomach drop. It was a video titled Megan_laugh. Emma clicked on it hesitantly. The screen filled with an image of Megan sitting in the den, laughing at something out of frame. The camera was shaky, like it had been filmed on a phone. The video wasn't incriminating on its own, but the fact that David had saved it, labeled it, and tucked it away sent chills down her spine. She closed the laptop abruptly, her breathing shallow. It was just a video. It didn't mean anything, did it? But combined with everything else, it felt like a piece of a puzzle she wasn't sure she wanted to complete. Emma returned to bed, her mind spinning. David was fast asleep, his breathing steady. She watched him for a long time, wondering how the man she loved could make her feel so secure and so uneasy at the same time. In the morning, she would confront him again. But this time, she would come armed with questions he couldn't evade. The morning light seeped into the room, but Emma felt no clarity. If anything, her sleepless night had only deepened her sense of unease. She couldn't ignore the video she had found. While it wasn't outright proof of anything, it confirmed her fears. David was giving Megan more attention than he should. David was already downstairs when Emma finally got out of bed. She found him in the kitchen, flipping pancakes and humming softly to himself. The domesticity of it all felt surreal, almost mocking. "Morning," David said with a smile as she entered. "Thought I'd make breakfast for everyone." Emma offered a tight smile, her heart pounding. She decided to wait until after Lily left for school to bring up what she'd found. She didn't want their daughter caught in the middle of this. Lily came down a few minutes later, grabbed a plate of pancakes, and headed out the door with her usual "bye, love you guys." Emma envied her obliviousness. It was only after the front door clicked shut that Emma turned to David, her face grim. "Can we talk?" she asked, her tone leaving no room for refusal. David's smile faltered. "Sure. What's on your mind?" Emma gestured toward the living room. "Let's sit." They settled on the couch, and Emma wasted no time. "I went through your laptop last night." David blinked, surprise and defensiveness flashing across his face. "What? Why would you do that?" "Because I've been feeling like something's off, and I needed answers," Emma replied, her voice steady but tense. "And I found something." David's jaw tightened. "What did you find?" Emma hesitated for a moment before continuing. "There's a video in one of your folders. A video of Megan. You labeled it Megan_laugh. Care to explain why?" David leaned back, exhaling sharply. "Emma, it's not what you think. I filmed that months ago. She was telling some story, and I thought it was funny, so I recorded it. That's all. Then why keep it?" Emma pressed. "Why label it like that? You don't think that looks strange?" David rubbed his temples. "I didn't think it was a big deal. I forgot it was even there." Emma crossed her arms, her gaze unrelenting. "David, I want to believe you. I really do. But with everything that's happened, the massages, the late-night conversations, I'm struggling here." David leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Emma, I swear to you, nothing is going on. I've been stupid, maybe careless, but I would never betray you." Emma searched his face, looking for any sign of deception. His words sounded sincere, but the doubt in her heart remained. "If you want me to believe you, then things need to change. No more private moments with Megan. No more excuses." "Done," David said quickly, reaching for her hand. "I'll do whatever it takes to fix this, Emma. I love you." Emma wanted to feel relief, to let his words soothe the ache inside her. But as she squeezed his hand, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that the worst was still to come. Later that evening, Megan came home from a day out. She breezed into the living room where Emma and David were sitting, her carefree demeanor grating against Emma's nerves. "Hey, what's with the serious faces?" Megan asked, plopping onto the couch. Emma turned to her, her voice calm but firm. "We need to set some boundaries, Megan. Starting now." Megan raised an eyebrow. "Boundaries?" "Yes," Emma replied. "No more massages. No more private conversations with David. This is my house, and I need to feel secure in it." Megan's expression shifted, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face. "Wow, paranoid much?" Emma stood, her tone sharpening. "This isn't up for debate. If you can't respect the boundaries I'm setting, maybe it's time for you to find another place to stay." Megan's eyes widened, but she said nothing. She glanced at David, as if expecting him to intervene, but he remained silent. Finally, Megan stood and walked out of the room, muttering under her breath. Emma turned to David, her voice softening. "Thank you for backing me up." David nodded, but his face was troubled. Emma didn't know if it was guilt, frustration, or something else entirely. All she knew was that this battle was far from over. The days following Emma's confrontation were tense, to say the least. Megan avoided Emma altogether, choosing to spend most of her time in her room or out of the house. David was quieter, too, walking on eggshells as if afraid any misstep might escalate the situation. Emma tried to focus on her work, but the tension in her home was a constant weight on her shoulders. The house no longer felt like a sanctuary, but a battlefield, each room a reminder of the fragile state of her family. Even Lily, usually oblivious to adult problems, began to notice. "Mom, is everything okay?" Lily asked one evening as Emma helped her with homework. Emma forced a smile. "Of course, sweetheart. Why do you ask?" Lily shrugged, twirling her pencil. "I don't know. It just feels weird around here lately. Aunt Megan's acting all quiet and Dad's, I don't know, different." Emma's heart sank. She hated that Lily could sense the growing rift. "It's nothing for you to worry about," she said gently. "Just grown-up stuff." Lily nodded, but her expression remained skeptical. Emma kissed her on the forehead and left the room, her chest tight with guilt. She wanted to protect her daughter from the chaos brewing beneath the surface, but it was becoming harder to shield her from it. Later that night, Emma found herself sitting alone in the living room, nursing a glass of wine. The quiet of the house felt oppressive, like the calm before a storm. She stared at the flickering glow of the TV, barely registering the program playing on the screen. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of Megan's voice drifting down the stairs. It was faint, but Emma could tell she was on the phone. She set her glass down and moved closer to the staircase, her curiosity piqued. "I just feel like she's overreacting," Megan was saying. "It's not like I've done anything wrong. She's so paranoid." Emma's jaw tightened. She gripped the banister, her knuckles white. A pause. Then Megan's voice dropped, almost conspiratorial. "No, he hasn't said anything. But you should see the way he looks at me when she's not around. It's intense." Emma's heart stopped. She couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but Megan's words were enough to make her blood boil. The anger surged through her, and before she could stop herself, she marched up the stairs. Megan was standing in her doorway, phone in hand. She turned, startled, as Emma appeared in the hall. "Who were you talking to?" Emma demanded, her voice icy. Megan ended the call and crossed her arms, her expression defiant. "None of your business." Emma took a step closer, her voice trembling with restrained fury. "You live in my house. Everything about what you do here is my business. So let's hear it. Who were you talking to, and what exactly were you saying about David?" Megan smirked, a flicker of amusement in her eyes. "You really are paranoid, aren't you?" Emma's composure snapped. "This isn't paranoia, Megan. This is me trying to protect my family from whatever game you're playing." Megan's expression hardened. "Game? You think I'm playing a game? Maybe you should take a closer look at your marriage, Emma. If David's attention is wandering, that's on him, not me." Emma's hand twitched at her side, her nails digging into her palm. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Pack your things, Megan. Megan blinked, caught off guard. What? You heard me, Emma said, her voice cold. You've overstayed your welcome. You need to leave. For the first time, Megan looked genuinely shaken. You can't be serious. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem, Emma replied. You've made it clear you don't respect me or my marriage. I'm done trying to keep the peace. Megan stared at her for a long moment before finally nodding, her jaw tight. Fine, I'll go. Megan began packing her things the next morning, the tension in the house thick enough to cut with a knife. She moved around quietly, avoiding Emma and David as much as possible. Lily, oblivious to the deeper issues at play, seemed confused by her aunt's sudden decision to leave. Aunt Megan, why are you moving out? Lily asked at breakfast, her eyes wide with concern. Megan glanced at Emma, her expression tight. It's just time for me to find my own place, sweetheart. I've been here long enough. Lily looked to Emma for confirmation, but Emma simply nodded. Your aunt needs to focus on her own life now. It's best for everyone. Lily frowned but didn't push further, sensing the gravity of the situation. She left for school shortly after, leaving the adults in the uneasy silence that had become the new normal. David finally spoke as Megan zipped up the last of her bags. Megan, I wish things didn't have to end like this. Megan looked at him, her eyes unreadable. Maybe they didn't. But here we are. Emma stood nearby, her arms crossed. She didn't trust herself to speak, knowing any words might escalate the already fraught situation. She watched as David moved to help Megan carry her bags to the door, his gestures hesitant, almost reluctant. As Megan stepped outside, she paused and turned to Emma. For what it's worth, I never meant to cause any problems. I hope you figure things out. Emma's jaw tightened, but she forced herself to respond. Goodbye, Megan. Megan lingered for a moment before walking down the driveway, where a friend's car waited to pick her up. Emma closed the door behind her and leaned against it, exhaling a long, shaky breath. The house felt emptier without Megan's presence, but it also felt less volatile. David stood in the living room, his hands shoved into his pockets. Are you happy now? He asked quietly. Emma shot him a sharp look. Don't you dare make me the villain here, David. This never would have happened if you'd set boundaries in the first place. David's shoulders sagged, and he sank onto the couch. I didn't mean it like that. I feel like I failed, like I let things get out of hand. Emma crossed the room and sat beside him, her voice softening. We both let things get out of hand, but it's not too late to fix this. David looked at her, his expression weary. Do you really believe that? Emma hesitated, the weight of their situation pressing down on her. I want to, but it's going to take work, David. From both of us. He nodded slowly, reaching for her hand. I'm willing to do whatever it takes, Emma. I don't want to lose you. Emma squeezed his hand, a flicker of hope igniting in her chest. Then let's start here. With honesty. No more secrets, no more excuses. David met her gaze, his eyes filled with a mix of regret and determination. No more secrets, he promised. For the first time in weeks, Emma felt a glimmer of relief. But deep down, she knew the road ahead would be anything but easy. The days stretched into weeks, and while the tension in the house lessened, it didn't disappear completely. Megan's departure had removed the immediate source of conflict, but the cracks in Emma and David's marriage were still visible. Both of them were trying, in their own ways, to bridge the gap, but unspoken doubts lingered. Emma threw herself even further into her work, taking on extra shifts whenever she could. She told herself it was to make up for lost time at the hospital, but deep down, she knew it was also an escape. The thought of coming home to the weight of unresolved feelings was daunting. David, on the other hand, began making more of an effort around the house. He planned family dinners, tried to engage more with Lily, and occasionally surprised Emma with little gestures. A bouquet of flowers, her favorite coffee, or a home-cooked meal waiting for her after a long shift. Emma appreciated his efforts, but she couldn't help but wonder if it was guilt, love, or a mixture of both driving his actions. One evening, as Emma arrived home, she found David and Lily laughing over a board game in the living room. For a moment, the scene felt almost normal. She stood in the doorway, watching them, a bittersweet smile on her face. "Mom, you're home," Lily called out, waving her over. "Come play with us." "Dad's losing horribly." David looked up and grinned, but there was a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. Emma hesitated too, her exhaustion battling with her desire to reconnect with her family. Finally, she set her bag down and joined them on the floor. For the next hour, Emma let herself relax. She laughed with Lily, teased David about his poor strategy, and for a brief moment felt like things might be okay. But as the game ended and Lily headed to bed, reality crept back in. David stayed behind as Emma began cleaning up the game pieces. He watched her for a moment before speaking. "It's nice, isn't it? Spending time like this." Emma nodded, not looking up. "It is. We should do it more often." "We will," David said, his voice earnest. "I mean it, Emma. I'm trying." Emma paused, her hands hovering over the game box. "I know you are, and I appreciate it, but it's hard for me to let go of everything that's happened." David sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I get that. I really do. I just wish I could make you believe me." Emma finally met his gaze. "It's not about belief, David. It's about trust, and trust takes time." David nodded slowly. "I'll give you all the time you need." Emma wanted to take comfort in his words, but the nagging doubts in her mind refused to quiet. Was she holding on to her suspicions unnecessarily, or was she right to be cautious? She didn't have the answers yet, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't ready to let her guard down just yet. As she headed upstairs to bed, Emma couldn't help but glance at the empty guest room where Megan had once stayed. It was quiet now, the lingering scent of lavender finally gone. But even in her absence, Megan's shadow still loomed over their lives, a reminder of how fragile trust could be. Emma awoke in the middle of the night, startled by a noise she couldn't place. She lay still, her heart pounding, listening to the faint hum of the house. Everything seemed quiet, but something didn't feel right. She slipped out of bed, careful not to wake David, and tiptoed into the hallway. Her first instinct was to check on Lily. She opened her daughter's door quietly and found her sound asleep, her face illuminated by the glow of her phone charging on the nightstand. Relieved, Emma closed the door and turned her attention back to the house. As she descended the stairs, she noticed a faint glow coming from the den. Her stomach tightened. She walked toward the room, her bare feet silent against the hardwood floor. Inside, David's laptop was open on the coffee table, its screen casting a pale light in the darkened room. Emma hesitated, her pulse quickening. She knew she shouldn't invade his privacy again, but curiosity and the lingering doubt in her mind got the better of her. She sat down and moved the mouse to wake the screen. The laptop was open to an email account she didn't recognize. Emma frowned, scrolling through the inbox. The messages were mostly spam and work-related, but one subject line caught her eye. "Miss you." She clicked on it, her breath hitching. The email was from Megan. Subject, "Miss you." From Megan. To David. Date, 3 days ago. "Hey David, I know things ended weird, and I hate how everything went down. I just wanted to say I miss you. I miss talking to you, laughing with you, everything. I know we agreed not to keep in touch, but I needed to say this. Take care, Megan." Emma stared at the screen, her stomach twisting in knots. The date on the email was after Megan had left. She had promised to stay away, yet here she was, reaching out to David. Worse, David hadn't mentioned this to Emma. Was he hiding it from her, or had he simply dismissed it as unimportant? Her hands shook as she closed the email and leaned back against the couch, her mind racing. She wanted to confront David immediately, but part of her was afraid of what she might hear. Instead, she closed the laptop, stood up, and returned upstairs. As she climbed back into bed, Emma glanced at David's sleeping form. She couldn't ignore the email. It was proof that Megan hadn't truly let go, and perhaps neither had David. The thought left a bitter taste in her mouth. The next morning, Emma waited until Lily had left for school before bringing it up. David was in the kitchen, pouring himself a cup of coffee, when Emma walked in. "I need to ask you something," she said, her voice steady but firm. David turned to her, his brow furrowing. "What's wrong?" Emma crossed her arms, her heart pounding. "Why is Megan emailing you?" David's face froze, the color draining from his cheeks. What? You heard me, Emma said, her tone sharper now. I found an email from her on your laptop last night. She said she misses you. Care to explain? David set his coffee mug down, his hands trembling slightly. Emma, I swear I didn't reply to her. She reached out, but I didn't respond. Emma's eyes narrowed. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you delete it? David sighed, running a hand through his hair. I didn't want to upset you. I thought if I ignored it, she'd leave me alone. Emma shook her head, her anger flaring. You should have told me, David. How am I supposed to trust you if you're keeping things like this from me? David stepped closer, his voice pleading. Emma, I swear I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't even read the email until now. I'll block her, okay? I'll do whatever you want. Emma stared at him, her emotions warring between anger and hurt. I don't know if that's enough, David. I don't know if anything is enough. David's face fell, his shoulders slumping. I'll prove it to you, Emma. Just don't give up on us. Emma didn't respond, turning and walking out of the kitchen. She needed space, time to process what she had found. But as she stepped outside into the crisp morning air, she couldn't help but wonder if their marriage could survive another betrayal, real or perceived. As Megan retreated into her room, Emma felt a mixture of relief and sadness. She hadn't wanted it to come to this, but she couldn't let Megan's presence continue to poison her home. She only hoped it wasn't already too late to repair the damage. The weight of Megan's email lingered between Emma and David like an unspoken accusation. Despite his reassurances and promises to block Megan, Emma found herself watching him more closely, searching for signs of deceit. She hated feeling this way, but her trust in him had been shaken to its core. David, for his part, seemed to genuinely try. He avoided his laptop when Emma was around and spent more time with her and Lily. He even suggested they attend couples therapy, a gesture that surprised Emma. I know things have been hard, David said one evening as they sat together on the couch. And I know I've made mistakes. But I want to fix this, Emma. I want us to be okay again. Emma looked at him, her heart aching. I want that too, David. But therapy? I don't know if it'll fix what's broken. We have to try, David said, his voice firm. I don't want to lose you. Emma nodded slowly. Okay, let's try. Their first session was awkward, to say the least. The therapist, a soft-spoken woman named Dr. Keller, guided them through the initial process, encouraging them to open up about their feelings and fears. Emma spoke first, her voice trembling. I feel betrayed. Even if nothing physical happened, it feels like David let someone else into our marriage. And that's hard to forgive. David's expression was pained. I didn't mean to hurt you, Emma. I was stupid and selfish, but I never stopped loving you. I felt disconnected, like we were living separate lives. Dr. Keller nodded, her pen moving across her notepad. Disconnection is common in relationships, especially when one partner feels neglected. But rebuilding trust takes time and consistent effort. Are you both willing to commit to that? Yes, David said without hesitation. Emma hesitated, then nodded. The session left Emma feeling raw but hopeful. It was the first time in weeks she felt like they were on the same team, working toward the same goal. But that fragile hope was soon tested. A few days later, Emma received a call at work from an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her pick up. Emma Carter? The voice on the other end asked. Yes, this is she, Emma replied. This is Denise. I'm a friend of Megan's. I'm calling because, well, I thought you should know something. Emma's stomach dropped. What is it? There was a pause, and then Denise said, Megan told me about the feelings she and David have for each other. She said nothing ever happened, but she also said it could have if you hadn't found out. Emma's blood ran cold. Why are you telling me this now? Because Megan's been talking about reaching out to David again. I thought you deserved to know. Emma ended the call, her hands trembling. Anger, betrayal, and heartbreak surged through her all at once. She knew she had to confront David, but she also needed to be sure of her next steps. She couldn't keep living in this state of uncertainty, always wondering if the next revelation would break her completely. That evening, she sat across from David at the dinner table, her gaze piercing. I got a call today. David looked up, his expression wary. From who? Someone who knows Megan. They told me she's been talking about you, about how things could have been different if I hadn't intervened. David's face drained of color. Emma, I swear. Stop. Emma interrupted, her voice sharp. I don't want excuses. I want the truth. Did you ever have feelings for her? David hesitated, and in that moment, Emma's heart sank. I don't know, he admitted. Maybe for a moment, I was drawn to her. But it didn't mean anything. It was a stupid, fleeting thing. Emma stood, her chair scraping against the floor. Do you even hear yourself? You let her into our lives, into our marriage. And now you're telling me it didn't mean anything? How am I supposed to trust you after this? David reached for her, his voice pleading. Emma, please. I know I screwed up, but I love you. I don't want anyone else. Emma stepped back, tears streaming down her face. I don't know if that's enough anymore, David. She turned and walked out of the room, leaving David alone at the table. Upstairs, she locked the bedroom door and sank onto the bed, her sobs muffled by a pillow. For the first time, she truly wondered if their marriage could survive this storm, or if it was already too late. The days that followed were a blur of tension and silence. Emma kept her distance from David, throwing herself into work and avoiding conversations that felt too raw to handle. At home, she spent most of her time with Lily, masking her inner turmoil with a forced smile. David, for his part, seemed desperate to reach her. He left handwritten notes on her bedside table, sent her texts during the day, and even cooked her favorite meals. But Emma couldn't bring herself to respond. Each attempt felt hollow, overshadowed by the lingering betrayal. One evening, as Emma sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone, Lily plopped down beside her. Mom, is everything okay with you and Dad? Emma's heart sank. Why do you ask? Lily shrugged, her gaze serious. You guys barely talk anymore, and you seem sad. Emma forced a smile, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's face. It's just grown-up stuff, sweetheart. Nothing for you to worry about. Lily frowned, unconvinced. You know, Dad talks about you a lot when you're not here. He says how much he misses you. Emma's chest tightened. Does he? Yeah, Lily said. I think he really loves you, Mom. He just doesn't know how to fix whatever's wrong. Emma nodded, her throat thick with emotion. She hugged Lily tightly, grateful for her daughter's unshakable belief in their family. But even Lily's words couldn't erase the doubt that had taken root in Emma's heart. That night, Emma found herself sitting at the dining table long after everyone else had gone to bed. She stared at a glass of wine, the liquid untouched, as her mind churned. She thought about Megan's email, Denise's call, and David's hesitant confession. The weight of it all pressed down on her, suffocating. Finally, she stood and walked upstairs. David was still awake, sitting on his side of the bed with a book in his hands. He looked up as she entered, his expression wary. Can we talk? Emma asked, her voice soft but firm. David set the book down. Of course. Emma sat on the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap. I don't know how to move forward, David. I don't know if I can. David's face fell. Emma, Let me finish, she interrupted. I've been trying to understand, trying to forgive. But every time I think about what happened, I feel like I'm falling apart. I don't know if I can trust you again. David reached for her hand, his touch tentative. I'll spend the rest of my life proving you can. I'll do whatever it takes. Emma met his gaze, tears welling in her eyes. I want to believe you. I really do. But I can't keep living like this, constantly wondering if there's more you're not telling me. David's voice cracked as he replied, There's nothing else, Emma. I swear. She pulled her hand away, standing abruptly. I need time, David. Time to figure out what I want, what's best for me. And for Lily. David stared at her, his face a mixture of heartbreak and fear. Does that mean you're leaving? Emma shook her head. No, not yet. But I need space. I can't keep pretending everything's fine. She turned and walked out of the room, her steps heavy with the weight of her decision. As she closed the door to the guest room behind her, she felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. For the first time, she was taking control, not just of her marriage, but of her own happiness. Emma woke up in the guest room the next morning, her body stiff but her mind surprisingly clear. The decision to create space between herself and David had been painful, but it was necessary. She needed to regain control of her life, her emotions, and her ability to trust. David's attempts to reconnect didn't falter. He knocked gently on the guest room door that morning, a steaming cup of coffee in hand. "Good morning," he said softly, his eyes pleading. "I thought you might need this." Emma hesitated before accepting the cup. "Thank you. Can we talk later?" David asked, his tone hopeful. Emma nodded but didn't commit to a time. She wasn't ready for another conversation yet. David seemed to understand and left her alone, his footsteps retreating down the hall. At work, Emma found herself confiding in a colleague, Dr. Melanie Hayes, who had been her closest friend at the hospital for years. Over a quick lunch in the break room, Emma finally let some of her guarded emotions spill out. "I don't know if I'm holding on for the right reasons," Emma admitted, "or if I'm just scared of what happens if I let go." Melanie, ever pragmatic, gave her a measured look. "Emma, you've been through a lot. No one could fault you for walking away. But ask yourself this. Are you holding on because you still see something worth saving? Or because it's what's familiar?" Emma considered her words, the truth of them cutting deep. "I don't know." "That's okay," Melanie said with a reassuring smile. "You don't have to have all the answers right now. Just give yourself time. And remember, whatever decision you make, it has to be for you. Not for David, not for Lily, but for you." Emma nodded, her friend's advice echoing in her mind as she returned to her rounds. The clarity she sought was still elusive, but she felt a spark of determination to figure it out. That evening, Emma found herself sitting on the back porch, the cool breeze brushing against her skin. She stared at the darkening sky, letting the stillness calm her. David joined her after a while, hesitating before sitting a few feet away. "I've been thinking a lot," he said quietly, breaking the silence. "About how we got here, about how I let things get so out of hand." Emma didn't respond, but she turned her gaze toward him, waiting for him to continue. "I think I was selfish," David admitted. "I let my insecurities take over, and instead of talking to you, I let myself drift towards something easier. But it wasn't real, Emma. It never was. You're my wife, and I should have fought for us instead of letting myself get distracted." Emma's throat tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "You hurt me, David, and you let Megan hurt me too." "I know," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And I'll regret it for the rest of my life. I know I can't erase what I've done, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn your trust back." Emma looked at him, searching his face for sincerity. "Trust isn't something you earn with words, David. It's earned with actions. Consistency. Time." David nodded. "I understand." They sat in silence for a while longer, the weight of their conversation hanging between them. For the first time, Emma felt a flicker of possibility. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward, but it would be on her terms. "I'm not making any promises," Emma said finally, her voice firm. "But I'm willing to see where this goes. For now." David reached out, his hand hovering near hers. "Thank you." Emma didn't take his hand, but she didn't pull away either. She stared at the stars above, her mind swirling with uncertainty. There was still so much to figure out, but for the first time, she felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, she could find her way through this. Weeks passed, and Emma and David began to navigate the fragile path toward reconciliation. The tension in the house eased gradually, but it was clear to both of them that rebuilding their marriage would require more than just time. They attended weekly therapy sessions with Dr. Keller, each session forcing them to confront the cracks in their relationship. For Emma, the process was a roller coaster. Some days, she felt hopeful, like they were making real progress. Other days, the memories of David's betrayal and the hurtful involvement of her sister resurfaced, threatening to undo everything they were working toward. But she pushed through, determined to find clarity, if not for the marriage, then for herself. David showed his commitment in tangible ways. He was more present, more attentive, and far more open than he'd been in years. He apologized repeatedly, not just for his actions, but for the ways he had neglected their relationship. And while Emma wasn't ready to fully forgive, she began to see the man she had fallen in love with reemerge. One evening, as Emma prepared dinner, Lily walked into the kitchen, her expression curious. "Mom, can I ask you something?" Emma smiled. "Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind?" Lily hesitated before speaking. Do you think you and Dad are going to be okay? Like really okay? Emma paused, her hands stilling over the cutting board. She looked at her daughter, her heart aching at the vulnerability in her eyes. I don't know, Lily, but we're trying. And sometimes, trying is all you can do. Lily nodded thoughtfully. I'm glad. I hate seeing you guys upset. It's weird. Emma chuckled softly, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's face. We're doing our best. That's all you need to worry about. As the months passed, the dynamics in the house shifted. Megan stayed out of their lives entirely, respecting Emma's demand for distance. The absence of her sister hurt in a way Emma hadn't anticipated. Despite everything, Megan had been family. But Emma knew that healing required boundaries, and some wounds needed time to scar over. David continued to prove his dedication. He blocked Megan's email and social media accounts, ensuring there would be no further contact. He also took on more responsibilities at home, giving Emma more time to rest and focus on herself. Slowly but surely, Emma began to feel the walls around her heart start to lower. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, David turned to Emma with a small smile. You know, this feels good, like we're finding our way back to each other. Emma met his gaze, her expression cautious but warm. It does, but it's still a work in progress. David nodded, and I'm okay with that, as long as we're moving forward. For the first time in a long time, Emma felt a spark of hope. The journey ahead was uncertain, but she realized that uncertainty didn't have to be a bad thing. It was an opportunity to rebuild, to redefine, and to rediscover. As they sat in the quiet comfort of their home, Emma reached for David's hand, squeezing it gently. She wasn't sure where they would end up, but for now, she was willing to take the next step, one day, one moment, one choice at a time.